Between December 1984 and the spring of 1987, something happened that no one has been able to explain to this day. A school teacher named Ken Webster started receiving a series of strange messages on his computer. At first, he thought it was just a prank by one of his friends. But what happened next defied all logic and turned into a supernatural phenomenon that shook the very concept of time. Now listen closely, for the details make the story. This is the story of three friends living together in a small village called Dodleston: Ken, Debbie, and Nick. Life was going on as usual until they started noticing something weird. The computer they had, one that wasn't connected to anything, since, well, there was no internet in 1984, began showing strange messages. Messages that were addressed to them by name, as if someone who knew them really well was writing. Over the following months, more and more of these messages appeared, one after another, sent by some mysterious figure. At first, Ken was sure it was just a hoax, but as time passed, things started to change. Slowly but surely, the three friends began to believe that the messages were real, and that whoever was sending them was someone who had once lived in that very same house, but in a different era, a long-lost time. Back then, Ken was working as a teacher at Hardin High School. The British government had just launched a big initiative to introduce computers into classrooms, and Hardin was lucky enough to receive a bunch of them. In fact, teachers were even allowed to take the machines home to learn how to use them. Ken, who lived with Debbie and Nick, decided one day to bring one of the computers home. He had no idea that this small decision would trigger a chain of events straight out of a nightmare. One day, while using the computer, he found a strange file. Inside it was a bizarre, jumbled message. It read, "Ken, Deb, Nick, truth, man's nightmare. The mountains are safe, bodies in the silent world, wrapped in a flower. Oh, beautiful sunbee, tomorrow you'll break and burn out. The flower that climbs too high dies in the burning sun." The words were twisted, poetic, and didn't make much sense. Neither Ken nor Nick had written it, so they figured it had to be a prank, probably by their friend John, who would sometimes visit to jam with them on guitar. Eventually, the computer was returned to the school, and Ken didn't bring another one home again until February 1985. But then, one night, with the computer on, another message appeared. Only this time, it was different. It was written in some kind of Old English, a weird, ancient-sounding language that didn't resemble anything from the 1980s. Here's what it basically said: "I write on behalf of many. What are these strange words you use? Though I admit my schooling was quite poor. Good sir, the thing that shines with devilish light seems very valuable. Not even my friend Edmund de Grey, nor the owner himself, could afford to buy it. Signed, L.W." Who was L.W.? Where did he come from? Was this all just some elaborate hoax? Or had time somehow, in a way no one could understand, started folding in on itself? Ken took a copy of the strange message to school, hoping maybe one of his fellow teachers could make sense of it. But just like he expected, most people either laughed it off or didn't take it seriously. Some thought it was a dumb joke. Others figured it was just a cry for attention. Only one person had a different take. Peter Trinder, an English teacher who specialized in ancient languages and dialects, stared at the message for a long time, then confidently said, "This isn't gibberish. It's written in very old English. Very old." He was intrigued, seriously intrigued. He asked Ken to bring him any new messages right away if more ever appeared. But Peter wasn't the only one who took interest. Another guy named John Cummins, who was also aware of what was going on, gave Ken a bold idea. Why not write back to the mysterious LW and see what happens? So Ken did exactly that. He typed out a message on the computer, directly addressed to LW. It said, "Dear LW, thank you for your message, and we apologize if we've disturbed you. What do you want from us? Did you live in a house on this land around the year 1620? Would you like us to tell you about our time? Who is Edmund de Grey? Do you have a family? Is the reigning King James? Or Charles? Was this village called Dodleston back then? And did you live here? Thank you. And thank you for not trying to scare us. Sincerely, Ken, Debbie, and John." They saved the message to a file on the computer, then left the house to grab a drink at the pub down in the village. They didn't say it out loud, but all three of them were hoping, really hoping, that when they got back, something would be waiting. And sure enough, there was. A new message had appeared. Same signature, LW. And this is what it said. "I live in a simple house made of wood and stone. I would be grateful if you told me more about your time. Do you still have horses? Edmund de Grey is the brother of John Grey. They live in the manor at Connerton. The king now is Henry VIII. He is 46 years old. I do not know of any king named James. LW March 28, 1521. But this response only made things more confusing. First off, the historical info was off. Henry VIII was king in 1521, but he was only 30 years old at the time, not 46. Second, the writing style didn't exactly match the 16th century. The message had modern punctuation, like question marks, which weren't even in use back then. And third, this place called Connerton Manor, where John and Edmund supposedly lived, it hadn't even been built yet, not for another 2 centuries. That's when Ken started to wonder again. Could this all really be a hoax? And if so, then there was something way darker going on. Was someone breaking into the house when they weren't there? Was someone watching them and planting the messages on the computer? Ken and the others asked the school to let them keep the computer longer, saying they just wanted more time to practice. But the truth? They were waiting for another message. And sure enough, it came. A new series of messages started arriving, and this time, they were more detailed, more personal, and they were signed with a full name. Lucas Wainman. Lucas began to open up. He talked about losing his wife and son to the plague, how he grew barley and brewed his own beer, how he made cheese himself. He described his home as a small cottage made from red stone. But here's the strange thing. The house Ken, Debbie, and Nick were living in, it wasn't made of red stone at all. At least, that's what they thought. Because during some garden renovations, they stumbled onto something chilling. Beneath the foundations of their house, they found traces of another structure. Ruins, old stonework, made from red sandstone, just like Lucas said. So now the question burned deeper. Was Lucas real? Had he actually lived there centuries ago? And more importantly, was this strange communication across time just the beginning? As more and more messages came through, Ken found himself sitting on a mountain of information, and he felt he had to start checking if any of it was real, or if this was all just some elaborate illusion. So he printed out a bunch of the messages and took them straight to Peter Trinder, hoping the English teacher could help him make sense of it all. The first thing Peter noticed was striking: the sentence structure, the dialect, even bits of scattered Latin within the texts. They all matched the kind of English spoken in the mid-16th century, specifically in Cheshire. the same region where Lucas Wainman claimed he lived. And what made the messages even more believable was how the historical details started lining up. In one of them, Lucas mentioned that the king had married Catherine Parr, which meant the timeline he was talking about had to be between 1543 and 1547. That perfectly matched other facts he had mentioned before. Lucas also told them he had studied at Brasenose College at Oxford. So clearly, he wasn't just some random farmer. He was educated, well educated for his time. Up to that point, Lucas didn't even know what time Ken was writing from. But Ken decided it was time to tell him the truth. He sent Lucas a message letting him know, plain and simple, he was writing from the year 1985. And that's when things started getting really weird. In one letter, Lucas dropped a bombshell. Ken wasn't the only one writing to him. There was a third party involved. Someone else was contacting Lucas too, from the year 2109. Lucas described a night when he was sitting by his fireplace. Suddenly, a strange light began to shine from the flames, and from that light, a mysterious man stepped out. At first, Lucas was terrified, but then the man spoke softly. "Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you." After the man disappeared, Lucas found something bizarre in his kitchen, a glowing box, and when he spoke to it, his words appeared on a glowing green screen. That's when it hit them. That box was a computer, a device given to Lucas by a visitor from the future. And somehow, that device had become a link, a portal, connecting 3 different timelines: the past, the present, and the future. While Ken's doubts were slowly starting to fade, the weirdness around them only intensified. The replies to their messages were coming in way too fast, faster than anyone could realistically break into the house and plant them manually. Ken, Debbie, and Peter were beginning to accept it. They were actually communicating with a man who had lived in that house over 400 years ago. But one question still loomed. Who, exactly, is 2109? Lucas didn't seem to know. He thought maybe those messages were just coming from Ken's friends. So Ken took matters into his own hands. He sat at the computer and wrote a direct message to 2109. And almost instantly, a response appeared on the screen. "Ken, Debbie, Peter, we are sorry. We can offer you only 2 choices. 1. We explain everything clearly, but doing so would trigger events that must not happen. 2. You try to understand on your own, knowing that the 3 of you will become responsible for changing the course of history. We, 2109, cannot directly influence your thoughts, but we can guide you, so you may shape your destiny yourselves. All we can say is, we are all part of the same world." That's when it hit them. Ken's computer wasn't just a window into the past. It was also a gateway to the future. According to 2109, this bizarre communication between past, present, and future had a purpose. And during that time, strange things started happening in the house. At night, they heard footsteps, soft movements echoing through the hallways. But whenever they got up to check, there was no one there, only footprints left behind. Parts of the house would suddenly turn ice cold. You could see your breath, as if you were standing outside on a freezing winter morning. Sometimes they'd walk into a room and find objects stacked on top of each other in bizarre, chilling patterns. Other times, they saw chalk writing, scribbled across walls and floors, words, symbols, warnings. Things got so intense they couldn't sleep. Eventually, they had to rent another house, just to get some rest. In the middle of all this chaos, Nick, who'd been with them from the very beginning, broke down. He couldn't take the pressure anymore. And he left. Ken and Debbie felt helpless. The story was slipping away from them. They had no idea what was going on anymore. That's when Peter Trinder stepped in again. He recommended they reach out to a group called the Society for Paranormal Research, a reputable team that investigates strange phenomena. And soon after, the Society responded. They sent 2 experts to Ken's house, Dave Welch and John Bucknell. Their mission was simple, but risky, to find out whether this phenomenon was real or just an elaborate, mind-bending hoax. When Dave Welch and John Bucknell arrived at Ken and Debbie's house, they came prepared to test the truth behind this strange communication with 2109. Their plan was simple, but smart. They would type 10 questions, addressed directly to 2109, without letting Ken or Debbie see them. Then, they'd delete the questions right off the computer. If any reply came through, Ken and Debbie would report it. A few days later, a response appeared. "Hello, David and John. David, you are interfering with communication. Next time you decide to carry out such an experiment, we suggest you find a different location, and we recommend leaving Debbie with someone else. Yes, you may refer to us as what you call formations or entities. We ask nothing of you except to continue your lives normally. Whether it's John or anyone else, proving the phenomenon is not a priority for us. Next time, we'll send you the coordinates of a star that hasn't been discovered yet. We move at high velocities to cover your entire timeline. We have no physical form, and we feed on thermal energy unknown to your science." 2109. While the message didn't answer the questions directly, Dave Welch noticed something that gave him chills. The message referenced the questions, in the exact order they had written them. That was all the proof Ken and Debbie needed. No one but Dave and John knew what was in those questions. They were never spoken out loud, never shared. But still, the investigators weren't fully convinced. They speculated that Ken and Debbie might have planted hidden microphones, or that ultra-sensitive listening devices could have picked up the sound of keyboard clicks and reconstructed the questions from the pattern of typing. When asked, "Did you say the questions out loud?" they replied, "No, we only typed them." But doubt still lingered. Frustrated, Ken began looking for some way, any way, to prove what was really going on. That's when one of his colleagues, Frank Davies, stepped up and volunteered to witness it himself. When Frank arrived, something immediately caught his attention. The room with the computer suddenly turned ice cold, then quickly warmed back up. They left the room briefly, and when they came back, a new message was waiting. Only this time, it wasn't from Lucas. It was from someone named John. In his message, John said he was a friend of Lucas, and that the local sheriff had arrested Lucas for practicing witchcraft and communicating with spirits. From that moment on, the messages stopped. Ken and Debbie had only one explanation. Lucas was in prison, locked away in a dark, cold cell. That's why he had gone silent. So they made a bold and borderline insane move. They typed a message into the computer, addressed to the sheriff. It said, "If you don't release Lucas immediately, we will use our power to destroy you." They acted as if they were the evil spirits the sheriff feared, and apparently, it worked. Not long after, Lucas was set free. From that point on, something changed. Ken and Lucas's relationship grew deeper, more human. There was trust now. Ken asked him, "Are you the one moving things around in our house?" Lucas's reply was shocking. "No, it's not me. The same thing is happening in my house, too." That's when they started suspecting a third party was involved. Could 2109 be behind all of this? Even though 2109 had warned both Ken and Lucas not to share personal details, the two men couldn't help it. The more they talked, the less they trusted 2109. And then, in a critical moment, Lucas revealed something huge: his real name, Thomas Harden. Ken and Peter immediately dove into the archives, and sure enough, they found records of a man by that name. A scholar at Brasenose College, Oxford, during the 1530s. He was real. It was him. Everything pointed to Lucas, Thomas, being genuinely from the past. But it seems that revelation didn't sit well with 2109. A few days later, Ken found a message written in chalk on the floor. Ken, Debbie, Peter. We suspect you have discovered the real name of Lucas Wainman. If this is true, you must inform us immediately so we can correct the situation. That eerie warning forced Ken to rethink everything. He began to notice strange things. Messages from Thomas seemed altered, details missing, edited, as if someone was controlling the flow of information, deciding what could or couldn't be shared between the past and the present. At the same time, the Society for Paranormal Research started pulling away. Eventually, they released a public statement in the newspapers. If this phenomenon is a hoax, then Ken and Peter are our prime suspects, or possibly a third party we've yet to identify. We had hoped to confirm this as a genuine supernatural event. It would have been the most significant one ever recorded. Something or someone is behind what's happening here. But as of now, we, the Society, have no suspect we can name with certainty. Just as Ken had predicted, the Society for Paranormal Research completely refused to acknowledge the case. It was as if it never happened. Still, Ken reached out, hoping to get a copy of the investigation records for himself, but the response he got was shocking. The Society told him, "We have no records related to this case." Even more disturbing, they claimed John Bucknall had disappeared, and that there was never a Dave Welch working for them in the first place. As far as the Society was concerned, this investigation never happened. But then, just days later, 2109 reached out again. They sent Ken a name and a phone number, along with a message. "Here's what we need you to do. There is a brilliant researcher in UFO and paranormal activity named Gary Rowe. He can assist you with some of the challenges you're facing. Call him using the number below and ask him to come to your house. Once he arrives, show him the messages and ask for his opinion. But Peter must be the one to call him, and tell Gary you got his number from someone interested in UFOs. 2109. So they did it, and Gary Rowe was more than willing. He agreed to visit the house. When he showed up, he came equipped with high-end tools, sensors, meters, ready to investigate. And as soon as he began, a new wave of messages appeared. This time, between him and 2109 directly. Then came a strange request. 2109 gave Ken specific instructions. He was to print out messages, seal them in envelopes without reading them, and hand them directly to Gary Rowe. But something in one of those messages must have been serious, because Gary changed. He became secretive, distant, protective of the letters, refusing to show anyone what was inside. And then just like that, he vanished. No explanation, no goodbye, nothing. Then, on March 20th, 1985, Ken received one final message from Thomas Harden. "My dear friends, the time has come for me to leave. I will sail from Cheshire to Bristol and then make my way to Oxford. I will write a book about our journey through your time. It may stay hidden for centuries, but I promise you, I'll write it before I die. With all my heart, Thomas Harden." But the questions lingered. Did Thomas actually write the book? Did it survive through time? Will we ever find it? Shortly after, 2109 sent one last message, their final sign-off. Another is coming. He will be the help we need. You'll know him when he arrives. Thomas did write the book. He passed away shortly after, but he hid it in a safe place. A place meant to be discovered someday. It was written in Latin with help from a friend at Oxford. In it, he wrote, "I write this book in hopes that my friends will find it one day. We will now end communication. No need to reply. Thank you for your cooperation." 2109. That was the last message they ever received. In total, over 300 messages were exchanged between 2109, Lucas, and Ken. Years later, Ken published a book documenting the entire experience. It was titled The Vertical Plane. In 1996, the BBC brought the case back into the spotlight, dedicating a full episode to it in their documentary series, Out of This World. Many still doubted the story. Some called it a hoax. Others believed it was science fiction disguised as fact. But through it all, Ken, Debbie, and Peter never backed down. They stood by every word, and they remained convinced that someday the truth will finally come out. But the one question everyone keeps asking is, was this story even real, or just an elaborate hoax? Opinions were split, sharply. On one side, you had Peter Trinder, the linguist who translated the messages. He said he spent years digging through Oxford's old English dictionaries, just to make sense of the strange vocabulary in those messages. He claimed the sentence structure, dialect, and even the bits of Latin all matched how people wrote and spoke in the mid-1500s, specifically in Cheshire, the region Thomas Harden claimed to live in. And he said, word for word, it would be extremely difficult to fake messages like these, especially for someone like Ken, who had no background in medieval languages. But then came the skeptics. Laura Wright, a historical linguist from Cambridge, wasn't convinced. She said some of the grammar had obvious mistakes, and that Thomas, or Lucas, used words that didn't even exist in 1546. When asked, "Do you think it was a hoax by someone who knew Old English well?" she replied, "No. If they were an expert, the trick would have been much cleaner. They would have matched verb tenses, pronouns, and writing style much more accurately. Still, there were things about this story that were just hard to explain. For example, John, the guy who used to visit Ken for guitar practice, said he never noticed anything strange in the house. But he also described Ken as polite, quiet, serious, the kind of guy who'd never make up a story like this for attention. Even weirder, throughout the entire ordeal, the messages revealed historical and scientific details no one could have predicted at the time. Like this. In one message, 2109 said that Fermat's last theorem, a math problem that had stumped scholars since 1637, would be solved within Ken's lifetime. And sure enough, in 1995, Andrew Wiles cracked the code, earning the prestigious Abel Prize in Mathematics. Coincidence? Or knowledge from the future? And that's not all. In another message, 2109 gave celestial coordinates for a star that hadn't been discovered yet. Years later, a quasar was found exactly in that location, just as they said. And even Gary Rowe, the paranormal researcher who disappeared, once posted on a blog years before his visit, "I believe every word of the Dodleston Messages. I was chosen by 2109 because they knew I'd protect what they gave me." But maybe the most incredible part of all? Despite the media attention, despite the BBC documentary in 1996, Ken and Debbie never tried to profit from the story. No book tours, no movie deals, no viral campaigns. Ken simply said, 10 years after all that happened, the only thing I feel I should do is bow down to God. And so now, we're left with one last mystery. Will someone someday discover an old Latin manuscript buried deep in the archives of Brasenose College, Oxford, telling the tale of a man who once spoke through a glowing box with friends he never met, across the walls of time? This was the story of the Dodleston Messages, one of the weirdest, most unexplained, and mind-bending paranormal events in history. And now it's your turn. What do you think? Was it real? Or was it all the work of a genius, weaving an unbelievable illusion? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget, like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a story like this. And if you loved this one, you'll definitely want to check out our video on the ghosts of Flight 401 and the chilling tale of the Green River Killer. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep watching the shadows.